in the story. Because every time I read something, God gives me something else that hits me right square where I am. And when I was reading this again, I really think the story has been named wrong all these years. I just think it's wrong. Because it's typically what? Typically the prodigal son. But it says the man had two sons. Two sons. You see, this is the thing here. Jesus has already talked about lost things. He's trying to give us some Blue's Clues here that he talked about a lost coin, he talked about a lost sheep, and now he's talking about lost sons. Two sons. But we always constantly talk about the younger one. The younger brother has been stealing the spotlight from the older brother for years. You see, a certain man had two sons. And it's really interesting to me. It's kind of funny. Everybody wants to talk about the one that went away and came back. But nobody wants to talk about the older brother. And I think we do the same thing a lot of times. Faithful people sometimes get forgotten. It's really, oftentimes, it's only the ones that make some noise that get celebrated. It's only ones that have shown some bad behavior that return, and we get excited and we celebrate their return. And that's okay. But I want us to understand what's trying to be taught here. You know, interestingly enough, I have a relative that has a relatively large church, and they do something that's pretty unique. It's pretty cool. It's called cardboard testimonies. Cardboard testimonies. And what they do, and it's typically young people. So you guys, this might be a great thing for you to try sometime. They get cardboard. And on one side of the cardboard, they write and draw, put pictures, whatever, of their crazy, messed up past. Everything bad that's happened, they put on the one side. And then on the other side, they put what God's done for them and how they've delivered. And so what they'll do is they get up and hold the one side, and here's where I was, and then they flip it over, and what God's done for me, and the church goes crazy. It's just awesome. So, I mean, they get it. The more messy the past, the more excited they get. I mean, somebody says, I've overdosed every night of my life on this side, but now I'm an overcomer. And so they got that. You know, I killed 10 people last week, but now I'm resurrected in Christ, and the whole church goes wild. You know, but the guy, the dude that writes, I've been in church since I was 3, and then flips his over and it says, I'm still here. Nobody gets excited about. So what do you do when your loyalty has become a liability? Why is it that we celebrate and sometimes we miss the opportunity to encourage those that are continued to be loyal to the faith, when in fact they may be struggling just as much as the ones who have left and returned? So as we continue to explore, you have to understand, when Jesus told this story, every person in that audience, when he told them about what the youngest son did when he came to his dad, I guarantee you every jaw in that audience hit the floor. Now, why would you say that? Well, his younger brother went into his dad and he said, Dad, I want my inheritance right now. I want it right now. Now, let's understand this. In this time period, you did not go ask your dad for what you would get after your dad died, before your dad died. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a little old school anyway. I'm not from a new school. See, nowadays kids get timeout. I used to get knocked out. I mean, it's just a little different day. I mean, you know, when I went and asked for an allowance, my dad said, I allow you to live here, and I will allow you to keep breathing if you will leave and don't ask again. So that's what I grew up in. So I don't think I was too far removed from where this man was. But you have to understand, in this time period, They were flabbergasted at the fact that a son would come to his dad and ask for an inheritance, because basically what that was saying to the father was, Dad, I wish you were dead. Dad, I wish you were dead, because I want my part now. I would just as soon that you be dead. You're dead to me, Dad. And you wonder, what had this father done to deserve this? What had he done to deserve it? Well, it appears to me that he was actually a good father, because he had an inheritance to give. You know, Proverbs 13:22 tells us that a good man leaves an inheritance for his family, for his kids. But in spite of his goodness, his son says to him, Dad, I wish you were dead. And so at this point, you can imagine the crowd that Jesus is with, they're like, oh my goodness. You know, at this point, the folks from the Sanhedrin, they're pulling up a seat, they're grabbing some popcorn, and they are sitting down listening, because this is about to get exciting, because they are waiting to see, what is this father going to do to this son that just asked this question? You know, in this day and age, he could have easily dragged him out by his ears. He could have cast him out of the house, thrown him out, banished him. He could have probably had him sentenced for something for that type of disrespect. But look at the love, look at the grace of the Father in this particular instance, because what he does, he said, okay, son. He says, okay. He says, I'll sell what I have. And he says, I'll give it to you. You see, sometimes the sound of grace is heard through a release. Sometimes the sound of grace is when the Father says, I'm going to allow you to go your own way and let you get to the end of yourself, so that you will realize that it's only in my house that you can find joy. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you do what you want to do, so when you get to the end of your wit's end, you will realize that it's only in the Father's house. It's only in my house that you will find satisfaction. And how many in this place today that God had allowed you at some point to go as far as you needed to go, until you got there and you decided that, Father, there is nothing like being in my Father's house, where there is peace, where there is joy, where there is an abundance, where there is grace. That's the love of the Father that we serve. You see, the Father will let you go, but every day He'll stand by the roadside, waiting to see when you're going to return. And that's what Jesus described here. He said the Father would go out every day. And see, I can picture this. I can picture the Father standing there, just kind of standing at the end of the road, looking for his son. And then the older son. I can see the older son coming over and saying, Dad, I got this. Forget about him. I got this. Dad, don't worry. I've always been here with you. Dad, it's going to be okay. I know you're heartbroken. I know you didn't want him to leave, but Dad, I'm here. You know, Dad, it's going to be okay. Don't worry, Dad. I'll do my share of the work. I'll do his share of the work. I'm not going to let anything go. So, Dad, you don't have to worry. Dad, you still got me. I'm right here. I'm not going to leave you. I'll always be faithful. Dad, don't worry about him. Because it's our performance that gets him to love us, right? Because it's what I do for him that will cause the Father to in turn love me. No. It's not what we can do, because you can't earn grace. The Son could not earn the grace of his Father, because his Father already loved him with everything that was in him. I can see as time continues to go by, The dad's still standing there. At this point, the elder brother's got to become frustrated. Dad, why are you still waiting for him to come back? What's wrong? Why? It's been 6 months at this point. He's not coming back. Why are you so concerned? Why are you so worried about him? I'm right here, Dad. I'm right here. And can't you see at this point that there wasn't just one lost son, but there were two lost sons because both of their hearts were distant from the Father. You see, one son had allowed his physical presence to leave the Father. But the one that stayed in the house, his heart was just as far away from the Father as the prodigal. There's a birth book that's written by Dr. Kevin Lehman. And Dr. Lehman really did a lot of research and analysis on the birth order of children and the traits that come with the birth order of children. And those of you that have multiple children, you will likely relate to some of this information. But what Dr. Lehman discovered is that typically the oldest child, now this is not always the case, typically older children display certain behaviors where they want to please people. They really want to make people, they want to get it right, they want to do right, they want to make dad and mom happy, they want to please people, and they also see things in categories. I mean, they put things in buckets. They compartmentalize things. Whereas younger siblings tend to be the free-spirited, they just do whatever, fly by the seat of their pants. That's typically the case. So you can see this as the older brother here says, you know what? I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to take care of Dad. I'm going to please him. I'm going to take care of the work. And then he starts putting things in categories. I can see him as he says, good people over here, bad people over here. Good things over here, bad things over here. So good people, me. Bad people, my brother. Good things all wrapped around right here. Bad things all over here. They can't ever touch. They're always separated. Life is in categories. It's all clean. It's all neat. Good things over here. Bad things over here. And then all of a sudden, as life is all cleanly separated, and I can see if we translate that, good things over here, bad things over here. And I translate to today, okay, good people over here, drunk drug addicts over here, church people over here, prostitutes and drug folks over here, criminals over here, good families over here. It's all compartmentalized. And then all of a sudden, grace comes along and goes and shuffles the deck all together. And the older brother's going, whoa, wait a minute, whoa, that's not the way this is supposed to work. We're supposed to have good people over here and bad people over here. Good things over here, bad things over here. But grace comes through and says, because grace is illogical, because it says that good things can happen to bad people. And aren't you glad that grace was illogical when it came to you? Aren't you glad that grace chose to use Rahab, a harlot, in the lineage of Jesus? Aren't you glad that grace chose to use Paul, a murderer, to write 2/3 of the New Testament? Is there anybody in this house that says, I am so thankful for grace that was willing to mix the deck, because if I was judged by being good or bad, I would have had no chance at all. But grace came to me regardless of my condition. Grace shatters the categories we put people in. You see, this is a question that people ask often. And when they ask me and I give them the answer, they typically don't like it. Have you ever heard somebody say, if God is so good, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, there's something wrong with your premise. There are no good people. That was ruined with Adam. We're all bad people, but we have been covered with the grace of God. You see, Jesus came down and lived the life that I should have lived and died the death that I should have died, so that when the Father looks down at me, all He sees is the blood of His Son. He doesn't see the flaws that are within me. He sees the sacrifice of His Son that has saved and has covered my soul. So we keep going. It's no wonder the younger brother, on his way back, I'm sure as he sat in the pig pen, he'd written out his acceptance letter to his dad, making his apology, praying for mercy, scared to death. And on his way back down the road, you see the father standing there seeing him. Because it says, what? While we were yet sinners, He still loved us. The Father's looking. And what it says here is pretty interesting. It says what? Father didn't just wait on him to get home. He said He ran to him. And I find that interesting as I did a little homework on that. The patriarch of families at that point, to run, because typically robes were to the floor, to the ground. To run, he would have had to pull up his robe, right? Because you can't run when that's to the ground. He'd had to pull it up. And he would have exposed his legs as he was running. And for a Jewish upper class individual to expose themselves would be shameful and inappropriate. Yet what we saw here was this father said, it doesn't matter what I get exposed to. It doesn't matter what shame I have to endure. I am running to salvage and to redeem my son. I don't know about you, but I'm so glad that Jesus said it doesn't matter what kind of shame I have to endure. I am going to exonerate my children from this age forward, because I will take whatever it takes to redeem my children. So his boy comes to him. He comes to him. I can see as they embrace. I see his acceptance speech. He's saying, Dad, I got this note for you. And he just wipes it away. He's like, son, I don't need that. What does he say? He says, you can't earn this. You can't earn this, son. He says, but what? Go get my robe. Go get a robe. Covering. Whose robe had the best? He said, get the best robe in the house. Who do you think had the best robe in the house? The father had the best robe in the house. So he says, you know what, son? You can't earn this. But as he put his robe around him, he said, but my righteousness will cover you. He said, my righteousness will cover you. My righteousness, my robe will cover you and keep you. And he said, let's not stop there. Go kill the fatted calf. He said, there we are having steak tonight. Break out the A1 and the Heinz 57. We are eating good tonight. And the interesting part here, understand meat was a delicacy at this point in time. This was not something that was cheap or inexpensive. When you killed the fatted calf, the calf was being prepared for a large group. Typically speaking, when the fatted calf was slain, it was for the entire village, the entire community to come together and to celebrate. Now, this is where we typically roll the credits, have the altar call, close up shop, and go home. This is where we end it, because this is great. Prodigal's home, right? But there are two sons. Two sons. The other's out in the field. But the elder son certainly has a perspective on what's going on. You see, prodigal, we use that term, and there's plenty of ways to define that: wasteful, profligate, imprudent. There are a number of ways to define that, but when it's used as a noun, it talks about an individual who has left, who's been broken, and his return. In this case, the one that stayed at home was just as much of a prodigal as the one that moved out, because his heart had strayed so far away from the heart of his father. And we look at him, we look at the other son out in the field, and I think a lot of times it's easier to deal with the younger son who went away and wasted everything. It's easy to focus on him, because I think the older brother sometimes looks too much like us. And as we look at this, let's check ourselves as we go through this, because the younger son had to repent of his badness, whereas the older son had to repent of his goodness, because he was thinking that what he did for his father would earn him grace. And you know what? That's just as bad as thinking that someone has been disqualified because of how bad they are. It's just as bad to think that my goodness earns me more grace than that individual whose badness would seemingly disqualify them. So he's out on the field, and he hears music and dancing. Now I want to take some exegetical license right here at the end, and this is what I think happened. If I was telling the story, this is the way I would have seen it. I can see the older brother. He hears music and dancing. Oh, you know what? I think that's my favorite song. I bet they're planning me a party. After all this time, I am finally going to get recognized for all this work that I've been. Oh, I just can't. This is fantastic. They're throwing a surprise party for me. You know, should I go change clothes? What should I wear? Now, when I go talk to them, should I act surprised when they come in? Or how should I act when I see them? And then finally, he comes upon a servant, and he kind of, tongue-in-cheek says, hey, servant, I hear the music going on over there. So it sounds kind of like they're having a party. What's that all about? And then the servant says, oh, it's about your brother. He's returned. What? He's angry. He's furious. The party that he thought he had earned after being faithful for all this time was now being thrown for the brother who has done nothing but brought heartache and trouble to his father. He's angry. I'm not going in. I'm not going in. And then we see the only consistent figure in the story is the father comes out to him. The father still comes out to that other prodigal son because he loved him just as much, and he wanted him to experience the grace that his younger brother had experienced. Why don't you come in? Well, he was angry. He was frustrated. And I look at, as I overlay this for us as we're closing, as I look at our own lives, and I look at the traits of the elder brother. You might be an elder brother if you've lost your joy. You know, you think because you did this and you did that you deserve this or you deserve that. And you know what? Now you're frustrated because you put in this work for God, but God has not answered prayer the way you thought He should. And now your arms are folded and you're living with deep-rooted rebellion and bitterness inside you. You know what? The older brother said, but Dad, I've slaved for you. I've worked for you all these years. And you might find yourself in the shoes of the older brother if your want to has become a have to. You might find yourself very similar to the brother in the field that is working day after day after day, but his want to do that has now become obligatory and a have to. Have you ever found yourself saying, oh, I have to prepare for my class this weekend? Or we have to go to church tonight. If your want to is replaced by a have to, then you may be straying somewhat from the Father. You know, the younger brother said to him, he said, you never even gave me a goat. You cooked a fatted calf. You never even gave me as much as a goat for dinner. So that me and what? It says, me and a few of my friends could make merry. You see how exclusive self-righteousness becomes? You see, when we get so encapsulated within the good that we think we're doing, how his view had shrunk so much that it excluded the greater community and said, just a goat for just a few of my friends. You know, you might find yourself behaving like the elder brother if you're always comparing yourselves to others. You see, the elder brother at the very beginning of the passage, he doesn't even refer to his brother as his brother. He says, that son of yours. That son of yours, didn't call him by his name, didn't call him brother, didn't call him Bubba, didn't call him anything. He said, that son of yours. When you start disassociating with people, when you start looking at them and saying, how could they do that? Oh, let me stay away from them. How can they be participating in that? You know what? We as a church should be the most loving and the least pretentious people in the world, because we should see people through the lens of grace that came to us. And if you're not seeing the world that way, then you may find yourselves in the shoes of the elder brother. But look what the Father does. The Father came to him and he said, son, all I have is yours. I've always been with you, and you'll always be with me, and I love you. That's the sound of grace. Stand to your feet. You know, I think Jesus was telling the story because he wanted the scribes to come sit with him. I think he wanted to have the opportunity to share with them where they were in their relationship with God. I think he wanted them to understand, as he sat there among the sinners, he wanted them to understand that he loves the ones who think their badness disqualifies them, as well as the ones who think their goodness qualifies them. You see, the only constant here was the Father. He's not like a daisy that you pluck off. He loves me. He loves me not. He loves me. He loves me not. He is always a loving Father. And it is because he loves you is what qualifies you for grace. There is absolutely nothing you can do to earn it. It is only by his love and his care for us that he gives us to it. And you know, I think a lot of times people get tripped up. I think a lot of times people fall away from the Father because they get so caught up on the things that, oh, well, I've got to do this if I'm going to be a Christian. I've got to do this. Well, if I can't do that, then I must not be in the favor of the Father. But you know what? Neither one of these fell out of favor with the Father. The Father always loved them and was waiting on them to move their hearts back to Him. As every head's bowed and every eye's closed, there are times when Satan will attack you and attack